What's up, guys? It's Wyatt here with Chimicomics for another episode of Novel Nook, joined ever always by
It's me,
Riley Davis,
your boy.
Mr. Chimicomics himself. And this has been a long time coming. We really should have done this a long time ago, but we're here at the ChimiComics studio, also known as Tanner's Place, to record the finale for the Founding Omnibus, which right here, of Gaunt's Ghost. So we're doing the third book and what many call the best book of this series, but I think they're all great. Necropolis, which is city fighting, like Stalingrad from World War II. Because each book kind of has its own like theater of warfare they do. So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's probably like the most coherent, overall.
This is, to give you a little context, the writer for this, Dan Abnett, mostly was a comic writer at this point and had only done a lot of short stories when he started Gaunt's Ghost. So he had two novels under his belt now with this one, and this one was kind of like his, when he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. Hitting the stride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what would you give it out of 10?
Out of 10, I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I thought it was the most coherent of the three that we've read so far. And it does a good job of characterizing, even though the second book was all about that. I thought this book did a good job of that too.
Because they added new characters.
Yeah, exactly. The violence was like very well descriptive.
Yeah, I'd say I compare it to Stalingrad for a very good reason.
Yeah. I mean, just the sheer carnage of the entire battle and stuff. But the enemy was like bigger than ever in this book.
And the Ghost, this was like the most they've ever been outmatched.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But overall, definitely at least a 9 out of 10. I loved it.
I'm giving this one a 9.5 out of 10.
But yeah,
honestly, I'll give it a 10 out of 10. I just love these books. So,
perfect book. Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. So, for me. But I guess we'll go ahead and get into the meat and details. So if you do not want to be spoiled, I guess click off and watch later. Or
if
not.
you don't want to be spoiled, enjoy that 5-minute intro.
Yeah, enjoy that 5-minute intro where we talked about how great it was. But yeah. But that's not why you're here. You're here to hear it. So here we go. The opening is fairly different for a Gaunt's Ghost book because there's no ghosts around. It opens up with the city of Vervunhive on the planet of Vergas. It's a hive city. Not one that's as terrible as like Necromunda or one of the bigger hives in 40k. And this is a Warhammer 40k book. Probably should have said that earlier.
I want to say one thing. I read this book like almost 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But the opening of the story has stood out in my mind beyond the other ones.
This is
because it was jeez.
Tanner's taking a shower.
Yeah, that's Tanner. But like it just felt like so cinematic the way the intro was,
and it adds so much normalcy to the universe that you don't usually see. Like
you're
it talks about,
you're taking a peek into every single person that you're gonna follow throughout the book.
And it shows everyday life in Vervunhive because like it describes the streets with like traffic lights and street signs and things you normally don't see in 40k because they're too busy making everything look like a cathedral. Which is why I love the Gaunt's Ghost series because they actually make the Sabbath worlds and 40k in particular feel like a real setting, which I applaud Abnett for going on.
And this one in particular is a hive world, so it's like it actually has a role to play in the entire universe.
Hive worlds are huge, like manufacturing centers. There's a huge wall around it, and outside the wall, the city still expands into these habs. Is what they're called.
And the way they name all of the streets and stuff, like it makes you realize exactly like how massive this planet really is because like it's just random letters and numbers like in a code is the street, and they all know the streets. Like it's so weird.
Yeah, because there's just so many because it's such a large city. There's a map. I don't know if we'll be able to edit that in. Probably not. But there's a map of the city. And it's kind of like there's a river that cuts.
Is that in this book?
It is actually. I'm pretty sure. Let me find it. I'm pretty sure it's at the beginning. Yeah. At least it should be. It wasn't my copy.
Maybe not.
Maybe not in yours. I read it.
For it. Go ahead.
Yeah, you look for it. But yeah, it enters, and we kind of get to meet all the different characters that are actual Vergastites and people who live in Vervunhive. So there's Lady Chass and her father, who are like these big, like they're part of the city leaders, like the elite aristocracy. They're the part of the Chass family, who are like on top there, like only second to the Sondor family. And the Sondor family played a huge part in the last war that Vervunhive fought, which was called the Trade War, which was with another city, another hive city on their planet called Zorik. And throughout this intro, the alarms sounding that an invasion is coming, and everyone's wondering if this is just a drill or if it's Zorik coming back again for another trade war, is what they think is happening. So you see Lady Chass and her father. You see Sorik. I have his first name here. Agon Sorik, and he's like a manager of a factory. And they're like talking about, he's like, oh, I'll just keep up a production or whatever. If they come, we'll go after them. There's Golkolia, who's a miner, and then his wife and children are away from him going through the city. And they're kind of going through, and then the bombardment starts. And the city starts getting bombarded, and Kolia's wife is killed in this, and his two children, very young children, are alone. But then this young woman called Tona, who's a gang member, basically saves them and leads them out and takes care of them throughout the entire battle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's her. There's also this piece of shit named Warlin, who is this guild guy.
Yeah.
He's only concerned with profit and business, so he doesn't care about defending the city. He gets ordered later on to shut down a pipeline from another city on the planet that's already been conquered, and
so they can't use it to invade through.
yeah, but he keeps it on just so they can get more fuel so he can make more money.
Yep.
So the force of Vergast here in Vervunhive is called Vervun Primary, and they haven't fought a war in like centuries at this point, so they're all green. And they actually go to meet the enemy with some of their tanks, and it's led by a man named Commissar Cow, and he's a full Imperial Guard Commissar, but he had a lot of casualties at a place called Balhot, and got punished with being the Commissar for this.
He ran away, didn't he? Didn't he like get into battle and just like kind of booked it?
I don't know if he booked it. I don't believe he booked it, actually. I'm pretty sure he just had made some bad tactical calls and got a lot of people killed.
Did that, yeah.
But he did that, but
I just remember him being a coward. I don't know.
he wasn't actually a coward. Like, he actually was, at least here, he actually faced and fought the enemy a lot, but
Oh no, he sacrificed people.
that's exactly it. That's what I'm saying. He had a lot of men die, and so they put him at this rear posting in Vervunhive where he leads like their local commissariat, which are like the secret police of the hive.
Yeah, that's it. My bad.
So yeah, him and a big thing of Vervun tanks go out to meet the enemy, and they just get completely destroyed. Like, their crews are all green, and Cal like retreats, but because he managed to lead a successful retreat, he's treated as this big hero by the people, and he's used for propaganda purposes for their defense. So
what is it they would say about him? They had some kind of like slogan.
They did.
Yeah.
I can't recall it.
I can't remember.
It's been like 5 or 4 months for him. It's been 6 months for me.
Basically, he's Captain America to this hive world.
Yeah.
And like later on, when Gaunt shows up, he's obviously a commissar. Well, they mistake him to be Commissar
They think
Cal,
he's Cal at one
and they're
point.
like, Commissar.
It's funny because Cal is, when Gaunt arrives, Cal is expecting that he's going to be the one to lead, that himself, Cal, is going to lead this big victory and get him back in good graces with command.
Mm-hmm.
But Gaunt already has a reputation, so he does not want to share glory at all. So he's automatically pitted against Gaunt here. But yeah, so the Vervun primary defenders dig in, and they're getting shelled, and they have this huge shield over the city that's keeping them from being just completely blasted in. But all the buildings outside are just obliterated, and that's where Golkolia is with his miners in the mines, and that's how they're able to survive, and they'll come in later. But the leader, I can't remember his first name, but he's Sondor, is his title. He's like the grandson or whatever of Hieronymo Sondor, who led Vervunhive to victory in the trade war, and he is in this tank. Basically, this weird. He's atrophied and not atrophied, but he's like gangrenous and giant mass of flesh in this tank where he's just sits there, and he's like connected to all the systems, like the computers in the city, and is able to experience life through that and keep track of profit and the like. And he's communicating with the other guy in charge of Zorik, which is the city-state, the hive city that is attacking Vervunhive at this point. He is out of his mind. Like, he's been getting contaminated by chaos, which is what's happened to Zorik. Because Zorik was a loyal city-state, but now it's fallen to the archenemy.
Was it Anko?
Anko Sondor.
Anko.
Yeah, that's right. And so yeah, he's getting corrupted, and it actually takes him a while to actually turn on the shield. Because he's like, no, this can't be happening. They couldn't possibly. I was in contact with him last week. I'll ask him right now. And a virus or something gets infected into him, so he gets even more out of it. And I'm pretty sure the guy who was in charge of the Vervun Primary tries to turn on the shield, and he kills him. And he only turns on the shield when they actually start getting bombarded. So that's what got Gol Kolia's wife killed, was him not turning on the shield in time.
Yeah.
So that is another thing to this story. But so they're holding out, and then they finally get reinforcements come in, and there's 4 regiments of Imperial Guard, the Volpun Blue Bloods, which were featured heavily in the last book we did, Ghostmaker, alongside the Rowan Deepers, and these are both infantry regiments. You have the Narminians, which are tankers, and of course you have the Tanith First and Only, who are light infantry scouts. And the Volpone, who are these royal aristocratic types, get a lot of fanfare when they arrive. They come in, they have the train and the road, and they have a parade and the like, and everyone's glad to see them. Guess
what the ghosts get?
The ghosts just come in like undetected, no fanfare at all, and get like, yeah, just go over to these warehouses and set up shop.
Yep.
And that's exactly what they want, because they don't really care.
They got a barn, didn't they?
Yeah, they got these like hab barns that used to like have like farm animals and the like. But yeah, so they start setting up, and they get to the gates of the city, and there's this huge fight at one gate where most of the ghosts are at, and the Vervun officer in charge of this gate completely like collapses. Like, he can't deal with the pressure, and he's giving like orders off, or not. He's not giving orders. That's the problem. They have like terrible communication, and a lot of men die in this harsh fighting. And the Chaos is actually able to breach through the gate a bit. And aftermath of this, they are able to repulse them, but Gaunt comes in and executes this leader for cowardice, basically. And this causes some like problems. They don't know
That's
if he.
one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, they. Because Gaunt's son, I'm an Imperial Fething Commissar. Blam! And this is one of the only times Gaunt actually executes someone in the entire series, because he doesn't like to do it. That's like his least favorite.
I thought it probably was.
Yeah. So he does this, and then Cal shows up, and he's like, "So Gaunt, do you believe your judgment was sound?" "Yes, and here's why." And he describes why he did this and exactly that. "So we must join a united front then. So I take it you're okay with me executing Colonel Grismond of the Narminian tanks." So one thing with the Hive, there are lots of refugees trying to flee the fighting, and they're clogging up all the roads. So it's very hard for the defenders who have just arrived to make it to the front. And doubly so for the Narminians, who have these huge tanks they're trying to get by. So they decide to get off the road and cut through a warehouse district, and this apparently is a bad thing to the Vervunhive commissars. So they arrest and detain their commanding officer, and the Narminians in protest will not go fight unless he's free. And Gaunt needs the Narminians because they are all tank aces, and the Zoikans who are attacking have a lot of armored vehicles. So Gaunt is forced to eat his words and leaves and tries to come up with a way to free Colonel Grismond so he can get the Narminians in the attack. Mm-hmm. So there's also another character It's called Bandower. He is a Vervun primary officer, and he's actually pretty good. And he's kind of joins with the Ghost at this point, and becomes like their liaison with the Vervun officers and units and the like.
Is he a colonel?
No, he was just a captain at this point.
Captain, okay.
Yeah, he's actually a captain. He's always a captain. I don't think he's been promoted yet in the newer books. But yeah.
Okay.
So he's around, and Gaunt has to get, like I said, get Colonel Grismond out, and he's pitched against a cow in doing this, and he's also pitched against General Sturm, who's the general of the Vulcan Blue Bloods, and they have this feud with the Ghost. So they've also got that to watch out for. So Gaunt leaves everything to Colm, Corbeck, and Ron and heads to the headquarters to try and sort all this out. And he ends up getting into a firefight with some Vervun Commissars. Him and I think Dower was with him. Dower was with Gaunt at this point. And they like go into like the depths of the headquarters, like into all the tunnels and the like that run under the city that are secure, like these bunkers.
To go get his guy out.
Yeah, to go get Grismond.
Yeah.
And they get in, like I said, they got into a firefight, and he's actually gets rescued by it's basically Major Kulkus, who was another blue blood who was in Ghostmaker, and he like kind of resolved their differences with the Ghost and is kind of okay with fighting alongside them now. He's still a bastard though, just because he's aristocratic and kind of looks down at everyone else, but he'll fight with them. So he saves them from these Commissar troops, and they rescue Grismond, and they end up like with Sturm. And Sturm, the gates have fallen, as has the shield at this point, because the head Sondor has gone completely off his rocker and decided to turn off the shield. He's completely fallen to chaos at this point. And so the bombardment is just blowing up all the defenses, and there's basically nothing they can do, and they're just getting shelled and attacked. So Sturm at this point is like, well, we did a good run, but it's time to leave. So he tries to get off the world, and Gaunt calls him off, as does Kulkus. Kulkus thinks it's cowardly as well. So Sturm is raging and all, and calling Gaunt all these terrible things, and there's a scribe in the room, and he sees the scribe writing down. He goes, "What are you writing down there?" He's like, "Oh, I'm recording your words in case the Commissar wants to levy charges of slander on you." At this point, so Sturm gets thrown out, and now command falls to Gaunt. So Gaunt has to lead the entire city's defense. So he's in headquarters at this point, doing this. He finds some time to get laid, though.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, because so Lady Chass and her father is like going to the command center where Sondor is to try and turn on the defenses and get things back in hand. And Gaunt ends up meeting with Lady Chass a lot, and they decide to bone at one point. So that happens. There's this huge fight in the headquarters against Sondor, and Commissar Cal actually sacrifices himself because Sondor morphs, like mutates into this chaos beast at this point, and Cal gets part of his arm eaten, but it was clutching a big thing of grenades, so he bites into the arm, the grenades go off, and Cal dies heroically. And Sondor is dead, so they don't have to worry about that. And Gaunt can focus entirely on the defense. And he does it masterfully. Like it really shows why he went to get the Colonel, free Colonel Grismond, because the Armenians just completely destroyed the entirety of the Zolican armored push that had made it into the city at this point. And the Zolicans have so much armor and tanks and the like. But the Guard aren't the only ones fighting. Like it's not just Vervun Primary and the Ghost and Blue Bloods and Armenians and Roans. The citizens of Vervunhive have come together and they form these little militia scratch companies. Sorik, the hab manager, like the factory manager we mentioned at the beginning, is leading a lot of these, and he's talking to one of the Ghosts, about what they're doing for the tanks. They have these mining explosives, no launchers, and they're basically running, clutching these explosives and letting the tanks run over them and letting them go off. And
crazy.
yeah, literally crazy, like kamikaze tactics. And the ghost hearing this is like, that's suicide, and he says, well, that's what we got to do. And they keep doing it. So outside of the city at this point, in the halves that have completely fallen, you have Golcolia's unit of scratch companies, and they're still fighting during all this, and they've got no support whatsoever, and it is like very hard fighting, very hard urban fighting.
Yeah.
So all of this is happening. Lots of combat, lots of action. Throughout this entire time, there's been this signal going out, and they've not been able to use their radios a lot because of this signal, and it has this weird chaotic rhythm. And if you read the first book in this series, when they were at Fortress Binary, you remember the drums?
Yeah.
That was a part of a ritual. So they're pretty sure that this is what's driving the Chaos forces, and that if they can destroy this signal, they can destroy the...
And then they say the great name.
Yeah. Herator Asphodel.
Yeah.
So the Sabbath Worlds campaign, the Chaos...
He was referred to in Ghostmaker, right?
Yeah, he was. So Herodor Asphodel was like the mechanist for the Chaos forces under the old Archon, and Gaunt thought that his unit had actually killed him back on Balhot with the old War Master, but he had actually fled and ended up in Zorik, where he turned the population to Chaos. And all these new machines that the Zoicans are using in this battle have all been made by him. And he's using this...
They refer to him as like a great political leader. Like
they do.
He can manipulate entire people.
Yeah, he's a huge machinist and very manipulative. He has this huge, like, gigantic command center that's mobile. And it makes its way into the city, and that's where they track down the signal to. So a combined force, Gaunt leads some of his ghosts, some of the Vervunhive troops and scratch companies, and Major Colchis with some blue bloods, and they get on these skyscrapers and jump onto it and break in, and it is pure CQB fighting. And Gaunt ends up dueling Herotor Asphodel himself, and he's wielding a sword that was gifted to him by Lady Chass. The awesome blade, the cool saber, the power sword of Hieronymo Sondor, which is like this heirloom for the Vergast Vervunhivers, and it can cut through basically anything. It's a power sword. It's like my favorite melee weapon in all of 40k.
Of course it is.
Yeah. So he almost dies doing this, but he does kill Herotor Asphodel, and the signal goes off, and this basically crushes the entire Zoican advance. And the defenders are able to counterattack and basically clean them out. And the Zoicans, I forgot to mention this, the Vervunhive troops, they have like 1 million troops out of their millions of people there. Not even that. I think they have 500,000 actually.
Yeah,
in their
it wasn't a lot
yeah.
compared to the population.
Yeah, and when you look at the Zoicans, they're like, how do they field so much? The entirety population of Zorik has been militarized. So Larkin at one point, Mad Larkin, a sniper, he actually is struggling and rips off the mask of one of them and sees the face, and it fucks him up because he's already mad, but it's a very young face. All the children have been augmented to grow bigger and be full grown.
And that was one thing that I was trying to convince the other generals of. There's no way that they have that many troops because their population is only so much.
But this is why, because they've fallen to chaos, because they didn't want to believe that they'd fallen to chaos. So so Asphodel dies, they all get the Zoican advance is crushed, and War Master Makarov has heard their call. They called for reinforcements, and he has basically brought in the big guns after they break this assault that was about to kill him. So he shows up with a bunch more reinforcements. They have entire Space Marine units are coming in as well. And I guess we'll go into In Remembrance, which I thought was really, really good. It's a short story after this one, and it's not long, but it has a very interesting point of view. It's from...
I don't know when he wrote this, but it's kind of just an epilogue to the story. But I know that sometimes these stories come out like years after the original.
It was probably added just for this omnibus, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would probably think so too. Yeah.
But yeah, it's let me find his name here.
Toru.
Yeah, Toru. Thoru. Whatever. Yeah.
Jeshua Thoru.
But he's a sculptor, and he's actually a pretty well-renowned one because someone we forgot to mention, Anna Kurth, who's a surgeon. When she meets him and he says, "Yeah, I'm a sculptor," and she immediately knows my name because he did a sculpture in her hospital.
Yeah.
So he is sent to meet with the 10th because he's been commissioned by Lady Chass to create a statue in honor of the victory at Vervunhive, and it's some victory because it just describes how the city is basically non-existent, and even after the fighting, they don't rebuild it. It's just been completely destroyed. So all the survivors move elsewhere and resettle somewhere else because the city is just completely gone.
I mean, all the people are just like fighting for their lives. Like, there's one point where the squad goes out like with Thoru, and like a bunch of kids show up and they're like, "Hey, we got snacks." They all run up to him like, it's like
that was with he wasn't
it's
with
like
the
a
squad.
Samaritan's Purse commercial.
Yeah, it wasn't like the squad. He was actually arriving at the town to do it with Korbeck and Varl.
Yeah.
And he's off with Korbeck, and Korbeck had already given away all his rations, so the kids are up pulling at him and the like. But then the truck horn blares, and Varl's like, "Hey kids, I got cakes," and starts throwing those at. And Korbeck tells them, "Yeah, we scrounged those around. They were going to be a treat for the ghosts, but this is better."
Yeah.
So. And he meets Gaunt. Gaunt is laid up in the hospital at this point, wounded, and he's like in a coma.
He's barely alive.
Yeah. And he eavesdropped twice. First time on Korbeck, he's like just giving Gaunt a status report basically, and it's a very emotional piece as well about art and the like and human suffering, and Korbeck talks about how he's honestly after this glad that Tanith died quick and didn't have to suffer through this.
And Korbeck like sends him out like into the worst of the carnage, like where Thoru thinks that like it's just debris and such like on the ground, but it's actually
bones.
Like bones.
Yeah. And he's sent out with Bragg and Fager, Batters or something like that.
The flamethrower guy.
Roston and Milo and a couple other troopers. Shoggy Domer's there too. And they're going out and he sees something amiss. Like he's looking at it with sculptor's eyes and he sees these rocks. He's like, that ain't natural. And he calls it out to Bragg, and Bragg's like, all right. And they throw a rock at it, and it was an IED, like a mine. So it goes off, and he's like, I may have just saved everyone's lives. But they get to talking with Fager. They all start arguing amongst each other over bullshit because they're soldiers. Fager got wounded in the book earlier where his throat got shot, so he has this augmetic box that makes everything he says in this deadpan, so he always sounds sarcastic. And they're like, "Stop sounding sarcastic." He's like, "I can't. It's the voice box." And they're like, "Well, how are we going to differentiate?" And one guy says, "How about you raise your hand every time you're actually sarcastic?" "That's a good idea." He raises his hand, and everyone's about to laugh, but then another guy raises his hand, and they know that he's not laughing. This is serious, so they get into cover, and Toru notices how they're getting into position, and the like how Larkin, because Larkin is with them as well, is like invisible basically. Like he turns to look at him, and he's like, "Where is he?" And he finally notices he's laying down with his cloak, with his rifle up. Yeah. Bragg has his turret up. The feeder's there with a make something like that. It's some weird name. It's like Maytkg, Metig, or something. But he's like feeding Bragg's gun, and they get into this firefight, and Toru's like keeping his head down the entire time. He says he never even saw the enemy during this. So Broston's flamer gets like blocked at one point, and he's trying to fix it, and Toru's like, "Hey, this is like those heat lamps I've used on a sculpture before," and he figures out how to fix it. And Broston's like, "No, you don't know jack shit. Get off of me. Get off me." But he fixes it. He's like, "Try it now." He's like, oh, that's pretty good. And that like turns the tide, but
Yeah.
before it happens, they do suffer one casualty. The guy who was feeding Bragg, and Bragg's the guy who's been watching out for Toru, and he like during this whole
Trying to
firefight,
get Bragg.
yeah, he looks at Toru and just smiles, and says, "Don't worry, we'll all be fine here in a minute. This will all be over." And he like he's this is like 60 years he wrote this after, because it's from his point of view, and he says that this imagery of him smiling has stuck with me my entire life. And the next thing that sticks with him is mate getting shot in the head, and like he thought he was I thought he was being silly, just dancing around like that on the ground, but it was just like a perfect hole in his head, cauterized wound. And I want to. So he does this, and he's like terrified when they finally get back. And, like he gets checked out by the medics, and Bragg is like talking to him. And he talks to Bragg and asked him how does they shut it out, the fear. And this is what he didn't talk to Bragg. He talks to Milo, actually, the youngest ghost who just basically became a trooper. And Milo shrugs, and he asks him, "How do you keep going?" And Milo shrugged, "I've never thought about it. It's just what we do, what we're asked to do. We're Imperial Guard. I've never forgotten those words." So yeah.
He also asked, like, how do you block this stuff out? Like, how do you cope? And he's like, we don't.
Yeah.
Because I'm scared every minute of my life.
Mm-hmm. So he goes back to the medical hall because he wants to see Gaunt one last time before he leaves, after he gets checked out. And he was Doran, and we forgot to mention, he meets Kurth earlier, and she basically, Korbeck is looking for Doran, and Kurth's like, oh, he's asleep. He worked 3 straight shifts, and I tried to get him to fall asleep, but he wouldn't, so I spiked his caffeine with some knockout drugs. "Oh, you gabbed him, did you?" And he's like, "Oh, don't worry, we won't write you up or anything. I know how Doran is." So Doran's back up, and he says, "Tori, you're all good." So they go to see Gaunt, and there's a bunch of like Vergastites with them from the book earlier from Necropolis, and they have all taken the act of conciliation, which has basically opened the ranks of the ghosts to Vergastites. So all the ones who fought alongside the ghosts for this book, for Necropolis, are now going to join the ghosts fully. Yeah, because
we lost some, so reload.
Yeah, they basically have lost so many casualties. They've had so many casualties, the ghosts have, that they're not an effective regiment anymore. So they basically have to do this to still be in a full regiment. And this allows for a lot of new characters to come into the next omnibus. Fucking Coup. I hate Coup. But we'll talk about him later when we get into the next omnibus. So Toru eavesdrop again, and it's Ron. He goes in to see Gaunt, no one stops him. Ron's in there, and Ron's like, "Listen to me, you fat white bastard. You better get out of this, because I'm the one who needs to kill you. If I don't kill you, it ain't right. You got it?" And then he sees Toru. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And he grabs him by the throat and shoves him on the wall. "What are you doing?" He goes, "By the God Emperor, look!" And Gaunt like wakes up at this moment. Ron was really about to kill this man. So thankfully he was saved by Gaunt waking up at this very moment. And he leaves. He never actually meets Gaunt. He ends up leaving, and he describes how his work and how he scrapped it a couple of times. But it stands today in the center of what was once Vervunhive's Commercia. The hive has been leveled, and most of the land turned back to pasture and grassland. Shards of rock, bits of bone, and spent shell cases can still be found on the windy slopes amongst the grasses. It's become my most famous work. There's irony. To say I was really truly pleased with it, I'd have raised a hand like Fager. I'd done so much since that seems to be more important, but you can't choose what you leave behind. A single Imperial Guardsman, cast in steel, rendered down from the broken weapons left in the ruins of the hive. It's not even specifically a Tanith ghost, and it has no special likeness. One fist is raised, not in victory, but in determination, a gesture like the one Baffles made. There is a set to the shoulders that resembles Colonel Korbeck's relaxed stance, a set to the head that always reminds me of Trooper Bragg's reassuring backwards glance. There's Milo's honesty in it, I like to think, and Ron's venom. It has, like all statues, McTagg's awful stilledness. It's called the Chass Memorial, and on the plinth it announces in large chiseled letters that House Chass paid for its construction in memory of the fallen of Vervunhive. In very much smaller letters, it says it is a work by Thuro of Northcold. It stands on a grassy slope, guarding the necropolis that was once called Vervunhive. It may stand forever. There's nothing of Gaunt himself in it, because I never knew him. Like I said, I never knew any of them. Not really. But his men are in it, so I suppose he is too. And that's how it ends.
Like a poem.
It really is. This is one of my favorite short stories ever, just because it covers so much when you have to deal with war and how men are able to do it and what they leave behind.
I feel like that was the most meaningful one of all the ones that were in here too.
I would say so as well. But yeah, perfect 10 for me, 9 for Riley. I highly recommend Gaunt's Ghost as a series. It's very long. There's like 15 or 16 books in it at this point. But
honestly, for such a big book, $20 is really not bad.
You know, you can get the omnibuses for like $20 each. And there's 3 books in this one. I'm pretty sure the Saints, and most of them have 4 actually.
Yeah.
So the Saints is the next one. It has 4. And I'm reading through it at this point. And I guess I need to order one for you.
You'll have to.
Okay. But we'll see. Because I definitely want to continue and do this full series just because. But hopefully not 6 months later after I read it. but
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But yeah, that's Gaunt's Ghost Necropolis. One of the best books in the Gaunt's Ghost franchise. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope this has convinced you to give it a read yourself. We breezed through a lot of it. We didn't go cover everything. Hopefully this has just been a touch that if you ignored the spoiler warning and kept watching, that you still want to get in and actually hear the meat of it and get into this whole series. And we'll definitely link our videos on First and Only and Ghostbanker down below.
And just reading the way he writes, just the experience alone is worth it. Even if you already know what's going to happen.
It really is, because I've read First and Only like 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you could reread these.
There's just so much to it.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Novel Nook. I'm Wyatt. That's Riley. And I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like and subscribe.
Fifth!